How do you best care for your pet when you're not here? Do you leave money directly to them or to a person? Is it just as simple as mentioning your pet in your will and leaving money to someone else to take care of them? Stay tuned. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first official podcast, Off the Record. I'm Valerie Powers-Smith, and I'm a partner at Slovak, Barron, MB, Murphy, and Pinckney. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. Anyone who knows me knows I am extremely enthusiastic about my animals. And we always try to do segments that we talk about if you do something right or wrong, how does that lead into litigation? And so today's topic is pet trusts. Today on Pet Trust, I have a guest, and his name is Rhys Powers-Smith.
Rhys Powers-Smith is a paralegal in the Trust Estate Probate Litigation Department at SBNP and Chief Emotional Support Officer. He has been working part-time for the firm for the past 2 years.
And he is one of my motivating factors to talk about today's topic. I have 2 rescue dogs. Rhys is a Vizsla German Shepherd Bloodhound, and I have Winston at home. Winston, if you're watching, he is a German Shepherd Border Collie. They are very important to me, and so I'm going to talk about concepts that probably will be familiar to people when they're talking about planning for minor children or special needs children. My situation is a little more complicated because I also have now 5 polo ponies. I had 4 when I last appeared at this podcast, and now I have 5. So we're going to talk about concepts of how you plan for their future. And I'd like to analogize it to how you would plan for your minor children since they are my children. Before we start talking about the topic for today's podcast, Pet Trust, let me tell you a little bit about my day and why I'm so passionate about animals. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and my first priority is my 2 rescue pups, Rhys, who is here, and Winston, who is home. And that is the way that I start my day. And what is it about dogs? Dogs are the purest sense of unconditional love and joy. And they make you recognize every day that there's something to be grateful for, there's something to be joyous about, and they are present in every moment. And I think if we can put down our phones and we can focus on them, there's so much that they give us to set the good intention for the day before we get bombarded by technology. I next then go on to getting in what we call my pony truck, and I drive to the ranch where I have my polo ponies. What is it about a horse? It's hard to talk about horses without getting teary-eyed. I can feel it happening now and emotional, but horses are magical. Horses are extremely intuitive. They meet you exactly where you are every single day. They know what you need, and they have taught me to lean into difficult moments, to lean into change, to lean into fear, because on the other side is trust and confidence that you may not believe was achievable. Yes, I talk to them, and yes, they talk back to me, but the power of nonverbal communication and how you become one with a being who is 1,100 pounds or more, and that works, sets the stage every day for me of what I have to deal with in my law profession. And if it weren't for that, I don't know if I could do what I do every day, because there's so much contention and so much acrimony. But I reckon it helps me be more empathetic and intuitive in my own work. And so I do that every morning to set my intention to be the best attorney I can in this field. I think why this topic is important to me is I don't lose my breath over the concept of one day I won't be here. It's part of life, and I deal with it every day with individuals. What makes me lose my breath is the concept of me dying before my animals. Anyone who loves animals knows that we lean into that fire every day of the uncertain grief that we will keep going through every pet we have and when they're no longer here. But that, to me, I would rather have than me dying before them. And I think that people really need to think about what happens when I die. It doesn't just work its way out. You need to make sure that you have someone who's going to take care of them, who is going to be committed to either carrying them for the rest of their life or having a successful rehoming that mimics the life that you would want them to have until they're no longer here. When you're doing planning, you want to think about, in the same way that you would if you're talking about if I die with minor children, who do I want to be their custodian or guardian? One of the first concepts that I would like to talk about so that people understand, and however offensive it is to Rhys because he's listening, pets are considered to be personal, tangible property. They are not considered to be the living beings that they are. Why do I bring that up? Well, the reason why I do is you may have heard of past cases where famous people have left money directly to their pets. Michael Jackson always hits the news. He left a reported, I think it's $2 million to his chimp. Leona Helmsley left everything. I believe that was about $12 million. Because she didn't do it by way of a pet trust, the court reduced it to $2 million and appointed someone in charge. There was also a very wealthy individual who had a German Shepherd who is reportedly known to be the wealthiest German Shepherd ever. Reports showed him sauntering around a home. He had caregivers and staff that came in and paid everything for him. So those are examples of where it worked and where it didn't. And then most recently, the beloved Diane Keaton, she did leave a pet trust. And for her golden retriever, Reggie, she left, I think, about $5 million for his ongoing care. Another case that was in the news was an eccentric individual who was wealthy from Canada, left it to his tabby cat by the name of Red. However, people often think that they can do that without the pet trust. In this example, he cleverly left it through a church that was tied to promising to care for Red. I've had cases where people have done that to individuals, but sometimes people don't think about the ramifications if they're doing it in California to what is called a care custodian. There is a presumption that that is an invalid bequest, and that could undo what you meant to do for the care of your pet. So always best to put it in a pet trust so as to not have that disaster happen. There was another case, again, cats, people like their cats, by the name of Tommaso, where money was left, again, not in a pet trust, but instead to the caregiving nurse to care for Tommaso. I have had cases where this has failed because of the challenge of giving money to a paid caregiver is by presumption invalid and presumed to be as a result of potential undue influence. And so again, if you want to leave money for the care of your pet, please do it in a pet trust and designate that caregiver as the person who's the custodian and trustee of those monies instead of tying it to that person and giving it directly, which undoubtedly will fail. Who's that person? How do I decide that? Well, I would say you want to have someone who shares similar philosophies, who feels the same way about care, and who you can trust is going to follow your instructions. The next thing that you want to talk about is, in same way as child, what kind of money am I going to set aside for the care? People always say, well, how do I even figure that out? It's the same way that you would for a child. What is that child's monthly budget, or as I like to say, monthly nut? Figure out, if I die today, what is that child's life expectancy, and how might things change, either more expensive or less expensive based on that, and try to figure out an amount that you want to set aside in a trust, and then you designate the person who's the custodian or guardian having use of those funds, and you can put as many or as little parameters on that as you want. What's also important, you want to talk about, just like with your children, with your pets, are they allergic to something? Is there a particular diet that they're used to? For me, my dogs go to daycare twice a week. We call it school. I'd like them to still have that lifestyle that I've had them grown accustomed to. And so I have to figure out, in addition to their food and their shelter, how much does that cost? Just like with children, what are the medical costs? Do you have a preferred veterinarian that you would like them to continue to see? Do you have philosophies about treatment? Do you have insurance? All of these things, you can see now why I'm making all of these analogies to as if you had a minor child. These are all important. I say to people, think about if you died and you had a child who was never going to grow and be older than 2 to 5 years. That is essentially what you're talking about if you leave a pet. They will always be dependent. They will always need food, clothing, and shelter. I smirk with clothing, but they have their own clothing needs as well. And they need programming. They need education. And so all of these things go into pet trust planning. Okay, so let's also we've talked about cats and dogs. And Rhys, what do you think? You know you have 5 equine siblings. So how does mommy take care of them right now? That's right. I pay someone, and he is a groom, and he cares for my horses 6 out of the 7 days a week. He has a Monday off. So other than cats and dogs, where are they going to live? That's an easier prospect of who are they going to live with, typically the custodian or guardian. You can't just put your horse in someone's garage. So you need someone who's going to care for them. You need someone who's going to keep them healthy and in shape. You need someone who is going to be able to detect if something is wrong with them. Unfortunately, the woes of veterinarian bills for we equestrians are common. And so perhaps even more so when you're talking about livestock, you want to be very detailed with your instructions so that the person who takes over, it's either the trustee getting them into the hands of the custodian who will be caring for them, or maybe that's the same person. But to make sure that they know exactly what to do and, of course, have the funds. I have known of people who have inherited horses from other people because they're amazing horse owners, but they don't have money. And so they graciously take it on, but there are a lot of things that they want to do, particularly with aging horses, just like any of we athletes who age, arthritis, you need medicine, you need certain things to keep you comfortable, maybe increased supplementation, maybe special feed. All of these things are an experienced horse care provider would know, and you want to be very clear about who you're doing that with. There's also, whether it's a cat, a dog, another type of animal, or as we're talking about polo horses, what if you don't have someone? What if where they are, they can't stay? You need to be very specific about how do you see them being rehomed? Are there animals that can only be rehomed together and they cannot be separated? Is there climate concerns? Are there particular philosophies you want to be followed? If all else fails, I know the ASPCA, they have a horse rescue program that is very robust, as well as for cats and dogs. Local agencies do rescues for all sorts of animals, and they can help with placement. I suggest if you have your animals hooked up with some organization that you either adopted from, many of them commit to, if anything ever happens to you, they will take them. They will not be harmed. They will keep them until they rehome them into an appropriate household. And there are also rescue organizations that can take on livestock, such as horses as well. So another example of how you have to factor in costs, not as much with dogs, perhaps, but horses can be completely fine one day, and the next day they can have a life-threatening condition. Anyone who's in the horse field will have heard of something known as colic. People who have had babies may have heard of it when they typically, their stomachs get very hard, but for horses, it's life-threatening, and it can literally be matters of hours that they don't survive. My eldest gelding, BIG, 2 Mays ago now, should have died. There is no reason that he should be here today. And my groom, 2 weeks into his job with me, called me in the morning and said he did not seem okay. By the time I got there, his head was hanging down. He had acid coming out of his stomach through his nostrils. It was not good, and he was going, he was going south fast. I put him in the back of a trailer that a friend of mine was kind enough to loan to us on an emergency basis, and Ernesto set off for San Diego, 2.5 hours away, in hopes that they would be able to save him. The vet told me who would be performing the surgery that she would call me from the OR because there may have been decisions to be made. And I basically just released everything to the universe and said to BIG, if you could hear me, you have everything available to you. If you want to be here, fight. If not, I don't want your life with me to be over, but I understand. 2 hours passed, no call. 4 hours passed, no call, as I lie in my bed, hands on my heart, waiting for some news. When I realized that 4 hours had passed, I knew that he had made it, and he was doing it, and he was fighting. 6 hours later, anxious and crying, I reached out to my personal vet to find out if she could get me news. And she responded that he was comfortably recovering in the ICU recovery unit, and he had done it. That experience not only shows how you have to plan, because that was an extraordinary expense. However, that is also something that shows the power of what animals can do for you in your life. Every single day, you should try to be present about something. And I'll tell you, every single time I am in his presence, I'm in that moment because I realize that this may be the last day with him. And I am very blessed and very grateful that I have been with him now for over 2 years past that moment that could have been the last I saw him. And he's still going. He's a strong boy. That's a story that I like to share with people because but for the appropriate savings and planning, someone may have lost their animal. So hopefully listening to these experiences helps you understand that basic planning isn't always appropriate. It's why I've really focused on what I consider specialized needs planning. It's not just for if you have someone who is elderly, but that's an important component. It's not just if you have a child with special needs or someone who later acquires disabling conditions such as a traumatic brain injury or maybe an autodegenerative condition that may affect their capacity, needs specialized planning to make sure that they're not exploited, that they're able to qualify for certain means tested. And so too for animals. Animals are more than what people think they are. They are living beings. They need to have specialized planning. And it's a real burgeoning area of law. I was just discussing today with a client that in the family law era, there are states across the nation that continue to start passing laws that animals in custody must be treated the same as children when a divorce is happening. There are also laws that are enacting that people will face real criminal penalties if they harm an animal in the same way that they will if they harm a child. And so I hope that at some point, animals aren't just treated as property, but rather part of the family, and that they need to have special consideration and they're not just like the car in the driveway. So what is your takeaway for your checklist? Look at what your life looks like and who you have to plan for, and make sure that you're being specific as to each. So maybe you have an aging parent, maybe you have minor children, maybe there's grandchildren that you want to make sure. There could be individuals in your family or a dear friend who has someone with special needs. And of course, apropos to today's topic, you could have animals or you could have more significant needs because you too, like me, have a stable full of horses. And so again, who is going to be in charge? Who is going to be managing the money? How are you going to fund what their budgetary needs are? Sometimes people don't have the money, so sometimes they have a life insurance policy or annuity pay into the trust. How are you going to make sure that that is preserved so that their care needs are met and until they may not be here anymore, whether it's a rehoming situation or they have passed away, and then you say what happens next with any money after that? How are you also compensating, if at all, the person who's caring for the animals or becomes the custodian so that there's no financial burden on those who you're asking to care for you? All of these are really important checklist items that you want to review and go through when you're doing the planning. We want to make sure that people are thinking about these, whether it's on the planning stage or on the litigation stage, and SBNP is here to help you. And we hope that you found this information helpful today. Stay tuned for future podcasts. We have a robust season coming forward for SBNP's Off the Record. What is great about SBNP and the podcasts to come is we are a full-service civil law firm, and you will learn a lot across many, many areas of law and how that may apply to you either now or in the future. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. So again, I'm Valerie Powers-Smith. This is Rhys Powers-Smith. And on behalf of both of us and Winston, Prosecco, Quinn, Annabella, BIG, and Poppy, we thank you for listening and caring about your pets.
This podcast is brought to you by David Field, producer. It is produced and directed by David Field and Kristen George, and it's mixed, edit, and socials by Kristen George. This podcast is for general informational purposes only and is not legal advice. Listening does not create an attorney-client relationship with SBEMP attorneys. Laws vary by state, and this discussion is based on California law. For advice about your specific situation, please consult qualified legal counsel.